special guest on the show this morning is economist and social impact entrepreneur Jayanta Das. Jayanta, a warm welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ranga. Good morning.
Very good morning, and let's start off with the good work, human service, which you're doing as far as skill development is concerned. Tell us now, of late the focus has completely shifted onto development and honing of skills for the entire country. What are you exactly trying to do and achieve?
Well, if you try to put in a peg on what exactly skill is all about, we have a huge and growing young population, one of the youngest in terms of a nation overall in the world. Now, it's very important to whatever training and education our youth is going through a normal curriculum and academia. We have to go beyond that. Yes. Because there has to be jobs which are to be given to these people, and let's also not forget there is a major drive in terms of Make in India, which is one of the flagship programs of the government. To only understand to make in India successful, it's very important to have Skill India. Yes. Because unless you have skilled people, you can't have a Make in India successful brand in that sense. So parallelly, what the government is also running is this huge flagship scheme focused towards the youth, typically from the age group of say 17, 18 onwards to 25, 30. Yeah. And the program offers them around 300, 400 job roles where they can get trained in terms of their local availability of jobs, or as well as in terms of their choice. So we as a company, what we do is we are established in around 8 to 9 states, trying to focus and execute this particular program at various levels. I mean, of course, there's a central government program, there are state government programs, and there are also private corporate programs which focus on it. But at the end of the day, there is a mutual convergence in terms of what you believe should be focused on, once again, the youth and what they want to achieve from it, and overall the big picture, what the nation wants to gain from this particular scheme. So that's where the whole focus lies in terms of Skill India banner.
Right. Jayanta, I'm sure you'll agree with me, like all these years we have been talking about all these issues. Lakhs of, youngsters are churned out every year. They do all these generic courses like BA, BCom and BSc and come into the job market, but without any specific skills. Exactly. But somehow or the other, despite the best of intentions, it has been ignored all these decades.
Well, I guess, Ranga, that's a good question. And traditionally, the whole country, when it comes to education, has been tuned towards a very routine curriculum where you
churning out generalists.
Yeah, you do first 12 to 13 years of formal schooling, and from there you try to go in for your graduation, or so if you have a bit more money, you try to opt in for an engineering course or a medical course or things like that. Right. And then you are out in the job market looking for work. Now, this is one part of the society. It's also important to understand there are school dropouts, which is a reality in India. I mean, we know they have 30 to 40% school dropouts. Right. Now, those sorts of people, which are equally in that sense, may not be economically empowered, as we call it, may not be staying in a city, or even if staying in a city, may not be having access to the best of facilities. Okay. Now, what do we do with such sort of youth? Where do they land up? What do they look forward to? Now, it's important for the government to come in and fill in this gap. Okay. And that's where precisely, if you see Skill India has tried to focus on the courses, depending on, the technicalities, or depending on the academic curriculum out over there, typically from 300 to 400 hours, sometimes even 500 hours if it's a too technical course. So what the government is asking you is, we are going to give you the last mile training in terms of whatever your qualifications are matching with the required training you seek. Okay. So we give you those 300, 400, 5 hours of quality training on the ground. Once you take the training, you get a certification done for yourself, which is standardized as per industry norms. And then once you get that certification, you can go and appear in the job market in terms of seeking a job employment. Okay. So, and as I said, if you look at the success stories of both the East Asian nations, if you look at the success stories of European nations, we have a huge amount of quality labor, which is very technically equipped. I mean, if I take an example of Europe, for example, say Airbus industry. Okay. Now, Airbus industry need not have MBAs and high-end engineers out there working. So they are there in the top level. But for the whole industry to work, for aircrafts to get manufactured, you need skilled people.
Shop floor.
Exactly, exactly. If I also may try to bring in a quote, recent quote, which the global Apple head spoke of, and when he was discussing China, why China? So people immediately come up with the arguments. They say in labor is cheap. Now he says that's not the case anymore. I mean, labor is over there, if not expensive, equally at par with what you're priced at. But China has taken a headway in terms of
Skilling
factories and manufacturers and things like that, is because you have a huge skilled manpower. So that's important. I mean, you can create a factory, you can create 10 factories in India, but do we have enough skill to run those factories locally? Do we have the skills available? I think that's the gap which we typically call the skill gap, which the government at this point of time is trying to address to. And then more so beyond that, if you look at as I said, there is economic deprivation, there is social deprivation in our society, which is a reality once again. And you need to somehow cater to these sorts of people also, people who can't focus on or get a decent education. So what do they do? I mean, everyone can't apply for, say, for example, a bank job or an office job or something like that.
That's right.
And as I said, there is a huge requirement in the lower entry level where lots of skills are required and which are typically not taught by large institutions. So it's important to understand these sorts of skills, and once again you train them, as I said, the last mile training, which I call, and then they can be incubated in a particular company. And then obviously every company, based on their processes, their manufacturing setup, if it's a manufacturing company or the services setup, they do the 3, 4, 6 months of on-job training over there before they are actually taken into the full payroll sort of a thing. So overall, as I said, there is not only just a demand supply gap to be focused on over here, but it's also important to understand, as I initially started our discussion with, to make in India successful, you have to have equally powerful and successful skill India, and that's what I guess the whole objective of the scheme is.
That's right. But Jayanta, I'm sure you'll agree, to make a meaningful contribution and a meaningful change, we need to map about the demand in specific sectors. Say for example, hospitality in some cities, there could be a demand for hospitality skilled workers. In other, maybe a plumber or a carpenter, especially in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, the demand could be for a different skill sets altogether. Is the mapping being done? What is needed where?
There are a lot of skill gap studies which are, for example, done by National Skills Development Corporation, which is a flagship organization jointly done by the government as well as the private sector bodies together. But in addition to that, Ranga, when the whole Skill India process is being executed pan-India, the scheme is designed in such a way that is completely market driven. I mean, just to give you a small example, we as a company in Assam and Bengal, we are training in tea plantation workers because obviously you can't train them in Delhi. You don't have a plantation and people will not be interested. Our skill centers in Delhi are focused on the service sector. So we train them in hospitality, we train them in financial services. Our skill centers in Orissa are focused on steel because it's got one of the largest steel hub in terms of production pan-India. So like us, all companies which are existing or operating or executing some part of training or skilling, it's driven by the local market requirement, what it is about, and then it's focused on what sort of trade people would prefer over there. So the first target is to ensure that the local people where you're setting up a skilling center or we are putting up money to set up a skilling center should be equally interested. And as I said, I have some 9 centers operating in tea gardens, for example. Now over there, in addition to tea gardens, there is a keen interest for people to get trained in hospitality, for example. So we also offer them wherever possible if they have large numbers of interest, and if the skill requires those sorts of interest out over there. We set up skilling centers in hospitality too. We have operated in the Chakma Hill district in Mizoram. Now over there, once again, our hospitality training center has been immensely successful. I mean, from our first batch of around 300 kids, over 220, 225 have been placed a couple of years ago, when we started over there.
So do you also play a role in placement of the student after skilling?
Now the schemes, it's all determined on what sort of schemes you're operating. One of the flagship schemes, which is the largest scheme in operation at this point of time, is Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, which is an end-to-end solution in terms of providing the particular trainee, in this case youth, not only very quality driven training,
Okay.
Then there is an assessment done, which is done by the Sector Skill Council,
Okay.
which is once again independent bodies, and they are all trade specific Sector Skill Council.
Okay.
So you have over 20 plus Sector Skill Councils in hospitality, in steel, or example in financial services, in beauty and wellness.
Okay.
So they are all specific Sector Skill Councils run by experts who design the curriculum,
Okay.
who look forward to the execution and implementation of the overall scheme, including setting up of labs, which is a critical point. And as I said, the 300 or 400 hours of training which the kid goes through
Okay.
is very qualitative and focused.
Okay.
And at the end of the day,
Does it end with a certification?
yeah, the Sector Skill Council typically comes and does an independent assessment on a specified day of a particular batch, and those who pass, they get a Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, NSDC and Sector Skill, all three of them certifying that particular
So
candidate
that's quite valuable.
for a particular job role. Now the story doesn't end there. It goes beyond that. What happens is the skilling company or the training partner, which we call over here, is supposed to place this candidate.
Yeah.
So that's as I said, it's a whole process, right from start of training to hand-holding and placing him.
Okay.
Where placement is not possible, or where the candidate wants to do something like self-employment, there are a lot of courses. You need not get placed everywhere.
Okay.
So sometimes you can pick up courses which can generate self-employment for them. For example, the ones which we do, beauty and wellness. We train them in, say, pedicure, manicure. We train them to be an assistant beauty therapist.
Okay.
And that particular person can go and take up a job, because the curriculum also has a good 40, 50, 60 hours of focus on self-employment. If you are doing a job on your own, for yourself, or a micro business as we call it, how to manage those businesses.
Okay.
So we give them those basic tips for those 40, 50, 60. It's a curriculum driven tips,
Okay.
and it's very organized manner. And then they also have access to Ranga, lots of micro loans.
Okay.
As of today, the government of India runs the Mudra loan scheme, which you would be knowing, focused on the micro loan sector.
That's right.
Now these sorts of students are supposed to be onboarded into those schemes, and they get an immediate access if they are PMKVY certified,
Okay.
or even if there's some local state government, state governments run this NULM scheme, which we are also doing for Delhi.
So they can start their own business.
Yeah, so they can go and apply for a loan,
Okay.
and the loan process becomes far more easier when you are qualified and focus on to run some particular business on which you have got a trained certification. And I believe, see that the way the whole scheme is rolling, there are obviously some challenges which obviously a scheme of this level would be seeing
Facing,
through.
yeah.
But the important aspect of any scheme, why not Skill India, only any scheme you take up, is how fast those challenges are addressed to.
Okay.
And the present system, the present policy, as well as the present government along with NSDC, has been very, very fast in addressing those challenges. And that's where I guess the successful rollout of the scheme is visible to a great extent.
That's right.
So we have people, say, far away in rural areas setting up small beauty parlor shops in their villages.
Okay.
They set an example to the other villagers. And a good 15,000-20,000 rupees of income, a steady income for any woman, is immense of money in a village.
That's
Come back to the cities, we have people, youth who have been school dropouts. I can give you examples of trainees which have come to us,
Okay.
and we have trained them. They are school dropouts, they have left school at class 6 or class 7 or class 8. They have got trained, for example, in the hospitality sector.
Okay.
Now they have gone back, they have worked in some cafe. You have lots of cafes in the NCR region, we all know. So they have taken up jobs there.
Okay.
Now English may not be the forte, but they do get trained in terms of soft skills and how to behave and things like that.
Right.
We should understand, they need not make a conversation with a client, but a basic hello, hi, are you happy with the services, sir? What can we deliver more for you, sir? Would you like me to call the chef, sir? For a detailed.
So those things
menu
can be
thing.
trained.
So those things can be trained, and they take great pride. And as I said, our youth today, Ranga, which I have learned over the last 3-4 years, which we have been working through, formally through my company, and then before that when I was obviously working in some other bigger company, we have seen that the youth today, if you give them those basic training,
Okay.
they are happily learning more to take it to the next mile. And I'll give a small example. There are a lot of apps which teach them basic English,
Okay.
which we were not aware of. So when they come to the class and they interact with the trainers, they learn those languages, and post certification, when they come back for a feedback, or when they come back just to meet our trainers or to meet other students, they say, sir, we have taken up this app and we have learned some 50-60 more words through these apps.
Wonderful.
So these are
they are improving
these are
on their
wonderful
own,
example. Exactly. We have kids who are getting trained in beauty therapy, for example.
Okay.
They post this training certification, the interest which they have developed, they have opened up small beauty parlors, or they are doing a go to home sort of a service,
Okay.
where they pick up in the weekend some 5-6 houses where they go and deliver. They have also learned much more further and better skills through YouTube videos.
Okay.
So as I said, if you empower the youth at the ground level with those basic training and inculcate that interest in that youth, our youth is far smarter today than what we were, say, when we were in our in the 1970s or 80s when we were young kids, to imbibe those skills and take it much more forward in a faster rate. And I think that's what the focus is.
And also IT would be immensely helping in that direction.
See, the most of them have access to phones. Digital India once again has been an important story to drive their learning crisis. My centers in Mizoram are in very remote areas. In some of the centers, it's a 16-hour drive, for example, from the nearest city. Now, kids over there still have phones which they access to, which they learn from. So somewhere down the line, these are all, as I say, most of the schemes are integrated to some way with the final convergence in terms of taking India to the next level.
That's right.
I mean, we have been a reforming economy since 1991, 25 years plus. So now it's very important to understand that all the learning, training, schemes, everything have to finally converge to a better India. And I think these are the best examples to be sought of.
That's the country, the economy has been talking about all these schemes for many years, many decades, so to say. I'll give you just a small example. There have been schemes, say for example, imparting tailoring skills to girls. And theoretically, 5,000 girls would have been trained and whatnot, and money would have been spent. But at the end, if you were to see the impact of those trainings, it's almost zero or nil. And none of those 5,000 girls would have taken tailoring as a profession or a career. And so that benefit or the money which has been spent, the effort which has been put in is not coming out. How is this particular scheme different from all those earlier schemes of various governments where that impact was not there?
Most of the schemes, as you rightly said, if you consider the schemes for the last 20, 30, 40 years,
exactly.
It was skill for the sake of skill. There are some numbers happening, you don't even know whether these guys are interested or not. And even if some of them were interested, they don't know what to do beyond that. I mean, you have a certification, fine. What next?
That's true.
Say for example, last week only someone told me in one of the remote villages of Madhya Pradesh where I was traveling, he said, sir, I am doing agricultural farming and my father is earning X amount of money. That's bare subsistence level. If I work, maybe I get a bit better, but I am still at my own place, in my own farm, doing my own work with my own relatives and family around. Now you give me this F&B certification, I have to, even if I take up a job, I have to move out of the village and go to the urban city and struggle, find a house, and all my problems of city problems comes in, and my salary will not be that high where I can, be able to substantiate myself why I need to go to the city.
Right.
So how is this certification going to help me? I think that's where the new scheme plays an important role.
Okay.
Where, as I said, at the local level, the training is imparted or happens completely driven by markets or completely driven by a sector in which you are working in around.
Okay.
And people, and see, migration is an important part of life in any world economy you go to. I mean, I am a migrant laborer. I am happy to call myself that. I was born and brought up in Kolkata. I have shifted to Delhi for education and then work. So at the end of the day, it happens at all levels, at all degrees. What we have to foresee now in terms of a vision is whether we can provide a job or a work employment opportunity, or if not both, at least a self-employment opportunity for that particular person in the 50-kilometer radius. So his costs of migrating doesn't come in, and his costs of staying away from home doesn't build up. So that is a stress on him.
That's true.
So I think that's the focus. Now, if that's the focus, and that's what I said, if the government is, the schemes are offering over 400 job roles at this point of time, across sectors. I mean, if you want to be a welding technician, you can learn welding technician anywhere. If you want to be a car driver, a taxi driver, you can get trained to be a taxi driver. And you can pick up a job anywhere. And that's what I said, it gives an opportunity. Now, to match this, and as you said, we are training, but how many of them are getting jobs? The scheme, as I said, provides a solution of providing a placement also, which is completely linked to the incentives which a training partner is getting who is executing the scheme.
Right.
So
because placement is the final proof of the pudding.
Exactly. And then beyond that, what we also need to understand is there has to be a parallel industry growth happening. Say for example, if we are training in hospitality in huge numbers in a place like Mizoram, now if you don't have adequate hotels to place them, what do we do with those numbers?
So you have to try and see match the supply and demand.
Exactly. So in that case, migration does happen, and we see a huge set of our Northeast youth so successfully delivering in the services sector across India, across cities.
That's true.
Now, those youth I am so happy to see, and this intermingling has happened in the last 10 to 15 years or more, where these people have come back from their homes out over there. They have integrated very nicely in cities,
Right.
and they are delivering services, and they are delivering quality services, which is no less than any of the city boys and girls.
Exactly.
So, those are fantastic examples. But then, as I said, going back to your point, it has to be an end-to-end delivery, and overall industry, both locally as well as at the national level, at the macro level, also has to have adequate growth to absorb this. My immediate figures do say that there are in particular sectors a lot of jobs available. Immediately I can call of retail, I can call of hospitality, and let me tell you of all the job melas, for example, which we send students to in Delhi, for example. I mean, I wouldn't be knowing about other cities, but yes, there is a huge requirement. Most of the companies who come in, they are unable to fill all the places because they don't have that much of candidates. So there is a huge demand in that sense. What we have to do is we have to meet it in the right manner, and we have to skew the overall scheme in such a manner so that the focus goes on training towards job availability, at least in the next 5 years, not as of today, because it has to have a vision, and that's where the important part comes in.
Right. Jayanta, we are talking about this interesting aspect and the entire gamut of issues related to skill development and employability. It's time now for a quick break, but when we come back from the break, we'll continue our discussion. Continue our conversation with Jayanta. We have been talking about skill enhancement. You have also diversified and gone into skilling people who are at a disadvantaged position, people and young boys and girls in juvenile homes, and also with Delhi police. Tell us about those initiatives.
What I thought of was to take skilling beyond our normal target force, and in this case, as I said, youth who have maybe school dropouts, so couldn't get economic advantages and things like that. But right in Delhi itself, there were areas where we believed that we can do some unique interventions, and I guess as far as my knowledge goes, is one of those unique interventions pan India which has ever happened. So we started with the juvenile jail concept, where Delhi has a juvenile jail, as we all know.
As a correction home, they call it correction home.
They call it a correction home, and they call it a place of safety. That's how it's branded. Now we picked up 53 trainees out over there who had been serving sentences with whatever law and order issues they had with themselves. And we picked up 53 kids and divided them into 2 batches. The first batch is already through, and we trained them in hospitality for 2 reasons. One is there are jobs available in hospitality in Delhi, given it's a service sector. And the other reason is because the course per se gives them a lot of training in terms of your soft skills, in terms of how you speak, in terms of your body language, in terms of your eye contacts and things like that, which we thought were an important soft skill impartation which can happen over there at the ground level for this particular set of people we have targeted. We had an immense success in our first pilot, which we did there for 29 kids. Out of those 29, as we speak, around 11 or 12 have been placed within 2 to 3 weeks.
But Jayanta, like most people would believe that organizations would be skeptical in taking people from a background like a juvenile correction home.
Exactly. See, now that's where we have to do an immense lot of work, which you're right, because there is a biodata check, which we all know. There's a security check and things like that. So what we did was, with the authorities, we earmarked kids who didn't do any sort of a really serious crime and things like that. And there's hardly 5 to 7% people out over there with serious heinous crimes, as we call it, say for example a contracted murder and things like that. So we segregated them, and as I said, we started with the first bunch in terms of people who could get an immediate bail or a parole based on their performance in the exams. So it has all been linked. So it's a process where JJB, the state government, the central government, which is paying for the project, we've all come together. The Ministry of Social Welfare, the Ministry of Welfare and Child Development of the Delhi government, they have all come together, and together we are working. It's not like me going there, training and coming back. And we have identified these sets of kids, we have trained them, and it was very important for us to set an example, because as you said initially in our discussion, unless placements happen. We do a training, and it's a difficult group to train, let me tell you. I mean, for youths of that age, say 16, 16 and a half, 17, to be caught up in the wrong side of the law and ending up behind bars is one of the most unhappy situations which can ever happen to kids of that age. I mean, they are in a very formative period of life, and going through such sort of a serious
And
sort
one
of a thing.
mistake, you know,
Exactly,
leads
as I
into
said,
this kind
going through such a serious phase of life, it takes an immense challenge rather than just a simple training to bring them out from there. We have also tried this in welfare homes for destitutes,
Yeah.
which obviously are where we have kids, both boys and girls, who don't have anyone to look forward to, and they're in government welfare homes, been taken care of the government at a particular age. So they are in that age till 18, and then after that they go to another home where they're taken care of after till 21, and then after 21 they're supposed to be independent out on the streets once again.
That's
So what do they do?
That's right.
So it's important, once again we went there, we have set up skilling centers. We have a center in a place called Nirmal Chaya for women, which you must have heard of. It's on Jail Road in the west of Delhi, where we are training at this point of time 30 women, girls, destitute girls in the age group of 18 to 20 in the beauty and wellness sector. Now, if you ask me, we train in thousands every year. I have never seen such a huge interest group of these 30 girls taking so much interest. We are training them specifically in pedicure and manicure. I have never seen a huge interest group so much who are so keen to understand the trade and learn the trade and enthusiasm and all.
They are probably desperate to change their lives.
Yeah, exactly. And I do believe post certification, we can provide some sort of a microfinance to them so that they can maybe create something of their own. 3-4 of them come together and create something of their own as services. As I said, it's just not empowerment, it is also giving them a due opportunity. We all got opportunities in life.
That's true.
And I think it has to be shared, given wherever possible. And that's where we are trying to integrate Skill India projects with going to special interventions like this. We call it special because it goes beyond the borders of what our normal target set is in Skill India program.
That's true.
So
and that positive attitude has to be maintained. We are talking about positive India. Jayanta, now let's also listen in to what these people who have been trained have to say.
मैं प्राइमरो स्किल्स सेंटर में ट्रेनिंग कर रहा हूँ F&B फूड एंड सर्विस। इस कोर्स को करने के बाद हम लगभग 10 सेक्टर्स में जॉब कर सकते हैं, जिसमें से मेजर हैं हॉस्पिटल, होटल्स एंड फ्लाई एयरवेज।
यहाँ कोर्स करने से बहुत फ़ायदा हो रहा है मुझे, और प्लेसमेंट ये लोग प्रोवाइड करते हैं।
किसी को इंटरेस्ट है यहाँ पे इंटरव्यू के लिए पहले से ही बुलाया जाता है और यहाँ पे पहले से ही आधे बच्चों की जॉब लग जाती है।
मैंने ऑनलाइन चेक करा PMKVY, जिससे मेरे को आज F&B सर्विस, हाउसकीपिंग ये सब कोर्स करने को मिले।
मेरा होटल मैनेजमेंट में काफ़ी इंटरेस्ट था, पर मेरी फैमिली अफोर्ड नहीं कर पा रही थी इतने पैसे, तो मेरे फ्रेंड्स ने मुझे ये सब बताया, तो मैंने यहाँ पे जब कोर्स किया मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा।
प्राइमरो और युवा को थैंक्स बोलना चाहूँगी इतना अच्छा कोर्स प्रोवाइड करने के लिए।
Jayanta, you are an economist, and recently there were changes in the Companies Act where 2% of the turnover was earmarked for corporate social responsibility activities. But many a times critics point a finger towards this particular provision and say that most of it is used by the company itself for its own employees. It's actually employee welfare, which is passed on as CSR. What are your viewpoints as far as CSR earmarked funds are concerned?
Well, I guess CSR would be a very important component in the years to come to drive skilling and training forward. And not just skilling and training, CSR means corporate social responsibility, where it goes beyond skilling and training. It also creates local social infrastructure, which can be available.
Some benefits to the society.
Yeah, it can be, say, for example, creating toilets in a particular village. It can be creating a classroom, a smart classroom in some remote village and things like that. But since we are speaking of skilling and training, if I focus on the skilling and training part, I am happy to say that a huge amount of CSR funds are now being driven towards training the youth. Now, a company has got two advantages. The biggest advantage over here is, of course, the money which you are spending, which you are mandated to spend by the government, focused on bringing the youth back into the system and training them. The other part is that a lot of companies who through CSR activities are able to identify extremely good performing workers whom they can further take into themselves, incubate them within their corporate sector, and then further make them grow. For example, we are working with ONGC at this point of time. We are running a pilot for ONGC from Delhi called Swalamban. Now, under that scheme, we have focused as a pilot, we have picked up boys and girls from the scheduled caste sector, and we have handpicked them. It's focused and targeted towards the SC and ST community, and we are targeting them to give them opportunities post training. So, and as I said, ONGC has got lots of schemes like this. I mean, sometimes targeted towards the youth, sometimes targeted towards a particular community where they're working in. And we are happy to share that it's doing fantastic results at this point of time. Project Swalaman, which we're working with ONGC, and we are also in talks with them to take this to the next level, where we are going to broad base it to more youth, beyond both boys and girls in the age group of say 18 to 22. We'll impart them with training and skilling, and then once again we'll give them jobs. But I'm happy to say that most of the CSR projects also now have gone in for a result driven rather than just a charity driven sort of activity.
I believe you're also associated with Delhi Police as such, but what kind of impact can you make in police stations? What are you targeting?
That's a fantastic example which Delhi Police has set forward under the brand name Yuva, which is basically connecting to the youth, and specifically connecting to the youth who are marginalized in some way or the other in the community. Once again, who won't have access to lots of facilities which maybe a youth of his age would be having. So what we have done is we have tied up and set up centers inside police stations. Now that gives a huge advantage in terms of community policing, which is an important aspect of policing, I believe. I am not an expert in terms of policing, but that's an important aspect. At the end of the day, any police anywhere in the world is supposed to provide safety, is supposed to be looked at as your friend, and not as a foe. And that's where the community policing or setting up police station skill centers inside police stations helps, because we end up in a police station with, when we go there with the problems.
That's
there's some problem which we wanted to sort it out. We wanted to take it beyond that level. We should have youths who would like to walk into a police station as a place where they not only learn, they get trained, they even get jobs. So we have placement drives done inside police stations where we train them. We have started the pilot. My company, for example, have started the pilot with 2 police stations. The very successful results will result in more. But Delhi Police overall has targeted in the first phase around 1,500 people, and they are doing such training as pan city NCR region, where they have started now identifying police stations and creating centers through training partners like us, and then giving them training depending on what they want to get trained on. And I think the central government support has come in a wonderful way. It creates an example whereby we say that, apart from a normal brick and mortar skilling center, now you can actually walk in happily. And it creates an image of where, a police station, as I said, is just not a solution provider to your problems, but also, a helping hand in academically, educationally, or even training you to achieve something in life.
Jayanta, it's time now for another very quick break, but our viewers would be keen to know the persona behind this personality.
Well, that will not be sneak peek. You want to take a full peek, I guess.
But obviously a quick one. We want a shortcut and want to know, about your schooling, your college days.
Well, most of my formal education has been in Kolkata, and that's where I've been brought up till I shifted for my postgrad from Delhi School of Economics in Delhi in 1992. And beyond that, I also did my MBA from FMS over here at Delhi University. So it's 25 years I'm in Delhi now plus. So I guess you get branded to be called a Delhite in that true sense. And of course, the city has had a massive change from 92 to what
in the last 25 years.
So it's a huge change.
And that's precisely the period when liberalization happened.
Exactly. So 1991 is when the formal first set of liberalization rocked the nation, rocked the world in terms of what India plans to look forward to. And Delhi being the capital, I have seen the city, I mean, we have all seen who have grown up in Delhi, growing to a huge size, what the city initially was in those early 90s. And given it's a hotbed of, as people say, politics, it's a hotbed of policies, and it's also the hotbed of learning in terms of, the various across the board strata which you get in terms of information, be it academics and things like that. What we also foresaw, I mean, I've seen over the last 25 is the growth of the NCR region, where we see Gurgaon being brought in. We saw how Noida shifted from Noida to Greater Noida and things like that. So it has been a fantastic experience in growing in such a huge cosmopolitan city with, I guess, at this point of time, if I'm not wrong, a population of around 35 million people or so, I guess.
Exactly.
Wrong,
And Jayanta, don't you think it's really wonderful? Means liberalization has done wonders to our economy. Say 40 years back, a person who would be on the verge of retirement would think of buying a house, would probably visit a bank for a loan and all. But that has now, shifted, and now people who are 25 or 30 years of age, they are having.
See,
you know,
exactly.
how-
But if you ask me as an economist, I would have been much more happier if the speed was a bit faster.
Okay.
And obviously, policies at this point of time are trying to focus on that. We are 25 years down the line in terms of liberalization, and we have a lot of things which we have achieved down the road, but there are plenty to achieve in terms of headroom and what we need. If you also see reformist economies globally, has been achieving lot of targets much more faster than what we did.
Okay.
Maybe the size, the demography is so huge, the change in culture. I mean, I'm sure no other country has such a huge set or subset of cultures, languages, religions, and things like that. What I do feel very happy is we have a very strong political economy existing at this point of time, and that's an important part. And we also have a very good social dialogue, both the political as well as the non-political part, in terms of India's achievements and where India should go forward to. What we should take great pride in is, despite the huge demographic difference, the huge cultural difference, we have as a democratic nation have taken huge leaps and bounds to be considered as one of the foremost practices of democracy, and I think that's where I take great pride in being an Indian at this point of time. And I think despite our differences, and sometimes the bitter differences, if I may call it, the common goal of objective of passionately surviving a democracy, I think that's the important achievement which I believe has taken place. I have been lucky to be in Delhi in these last 25 years to see it from close quarters. I have worked with the government, I have worked with one of the largest corporate sectors you're aware of. We have been friends for the last 15-20 years or so. But beyond that, as I said, the learnings from what India has grown into at this point of time is huge. And let me tell you, the next 5 years, we are surely going to, we have already created an impact globally in terms of India as a nation, both politically, in terms of economics and things like that. Could we have done better? There was a lot of headroom, and I guess we should fast achieve those sorts of targets.
Nevertheless, it's still happening.
Yeah, I mean, it would happen. I mean, it's a work in progress.
Talk about your book, reflections from one decade of liberalization. What were your conclusions?
When the reforms process started, I was a student, and the first decade from 1991 to 2001, I put in a fairly 6 to 7 years of working experience. So from those 90s, if you see, I've been lucky enough to understand the perspective of a student of where India is heading to and what all changes are being done, to the initial reform processes itself, where corporates were opening up. There were a lot of things which are coming in, cell phones were coming in. We saw those changes, and as I said, we are a kid of the 70s. I was born in the early 70s. We saw the process right from no television. In Kolkata, we didn't have television. In Delhi, it came in much earlier, but in Kolkata, we didn't have television when we were kids. So we started introducing ourselves to the black and white television, to the color television, to going now beyond and finally landing up in the internet and smartphone. So we, as they say, the kid of the 70s, have played outside in fields or in playgrounds for hours, then finally seeing our kids spending hours in front of a screen, which is right from 5-inch to maybe a 15-inch screen. So we have seen that change, and as I said, we are lucky enough to see that change. I think we are one of the fastest learners of our generation to imbibe those huge spectrum of changes throughout our life. So from that point of view, I do believe the change has been real fast. Our telecom revolution, for example, has been one of the outstanding
wonders.
It has been one of the outstanding examples, which I don't think has ever happened in any nation at this rate. Presently, we are talking of a digital economy. We are speaking of a digital India. We are speaking of smart villages. We are speaking of smart cities. Now, this is, I guess, the next step of the revolution, and it's a working process. How fast we make it is dependent on how good our policies are, and I think that's where all governments, irrespective of the color, choice, or whatever, has to stand up to.
Wonderful. Jayanto, on that positive, optimistic note, it's time to wind up this great, wonderful discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ranga. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's it in this edition of Aaj Savere. If you have any comments or feedback, please share it with us at aajsavere@ddkdelhi.org.in.